Hello, my name is Shane White. I currently serve as the president of the Hub of Ohio Volleyball Officials Association. Tonight, I will be talking with you about effective partnering. When we say effective partnering, what are we talking about? During this presentation, we will cover what do we mean by effective partnering? Why is effective partnering important? Who should we be partnering with? And how do we partner effectively? What do we mean by effective partnering? As the two primary officials assigned to the match, it is critical that you and your partner work together to ensure that all participants have the best match experience possible. Whether you are the R1 or the R2, it is your responsibility to work with your partner to facilitate the match in the fairest way possible. Remember, it's not about you. The match is about the student athletes who are playing the game. We owe it to them to do our very best. It's also important that we understand our expectations of each other. If you have things that you expect your partner to do for you when you work together, you need to be sure that you discuss that prior to the match. Don't assume that your partner today is going to behave just like your partner yesterday did. Even if you have worked together previously, it's a good idea to go over the basics of your expectations of each other when you're working together as a refresher. The final piece of the definition is knowing each other's approach. By this, we mean understanding how your partner approaches different situations. Each of you will have different ways you approach common aspects of the game. There is no way you will be able to cover every possible situation. However, understanding a person's general approach to the match can give you a pretty good understanding of how they will react in most situations, which should allow you to serve them better as a partner. Why is effective partnering important? Effective partnering gives you confidence in your partner and the rest of your crew. When you have taken the steps necessary to partner effectively, you have confidence in all of the members of your crew to do their jobs. That confidence is contagious. When the rest of your crew is confident, it allows them to carry out their duties more effectively. Effective partnering can also help to prevent issues during the match. By preparing and discussing with our partners ahead of time, we are ready for any issues that may arise during the match. This allows us to deal with the issue in the moment instead of having to have a conversation that we should have already had. This allows the match to continue to flow and not get bogged down with our approach. We can keep our focus on addressing the issue and moving on. All of this allows the entire crew to project confidence as a crew. This tells all participants that we are up to the task before us. When we project confidence as a crew, we are less likely to have our calls questioned, and we are more likely to be given the benefit of the doubt when calls are close. This doesn't mean that everyone is going to agree with all of our calls, but it can make our lives a little easier in those tight matches where every call seems to be close. Effective partnering can also allow the officiating crew to speak with one voice. This is particularly true of the R1 and the R2. When the R2 is communicating with the coach, it is important that the coach feel as though both officials are on the same page. Effective partnering allows the R2 to speak with the same voice as the R1. If a coach feels like the R2 and the R1 are speaking with the same voice, then it lessens the tendency to try to engage the R1 from across the court or try to prolong a conversation. Ultimately, the goal of all of this is to provide the best match experience possible for everyone involved. As officials, we want to communicate and use all of the information at our disposal to get the calls right. We also want all participants to be confident in our abilities and use our partnering skills to project that confidence. Effective partnering allows us to do our jobs effectively and efficiently and get out of the way, allowing the spotlight to be where it should be, on the players. Who should we be partnering with? Obviously, the first partnership is between your fellow assigned official. Whether you are the R1 or R2 for the match, you have an equal responsibility to be an effective partner. The next members of your officiating crew that are also responsible for making calls are your line judges. Whether your line judges are certified officials or parent volunteers, they are important members of your officiating team. It is critical that you make them feel like part of the team. Tell them your expectations. What happens if you call them to the stand during the match? What happens if you overrule them? Nothing that you do during the match should surprise them if you are partnering effectively. Next, include your scorer in your partnering. As the R2, tell the scorer what you will expect at timeouts and between sets. Determine what your process will be when dealing with substitutions. You should also include your assistant scorer or libero tracker, or spotter if they are using an electronic score sheet. If there is specific information that you would like from them, be sure to tell them during the warm-up period. The scoreboard operator should also be included as part of the crew. You will want to go over warm-up timings, timeout procedures, when the horn should sound, what visual cues you may give if both teams come out early, and how to handle timing between sets. All of these are important to the smooth operation of the match. Finally, you will want to identify the host school's representative on site in case there are any issues that need to be addressed during the match. While it is rare that you will ever need to call upon this person during the match, it is much better to know who it is in advance and where they will be during the match than try to track them down when you really need them. Now that we've seen the importance of effective partnering, it's time to put some of that into practice and see how to be effective partners for each other. And to do that, we've brought in some friends from around Central Ohio. And to do that tonight, we've got Lucas Tuggle, Rick Brown, Jim Hammer, and Lori Francescan. So guys, thanks, and gals, thanks very much for joining me tonight and helping me out with this part of the presentation. And we're gonna kind of go through some of the things that we would go through in a typical match day, and for this year, not so typical match day, and talk a little bit about what we would do as we kind of work through the different parts and pieces of a particular match. And first, let's talk right out of the gate before we actually get to the match or as we are at the match, and what we would do pre-match. So let's talk first about kind of the pre-match talk or what we would do as we arrive at the facility. So what are some things that as partners that we should be thinking about together to do first?
The subjects that I'm going to raise to come to common understandings with my partner are partly contingent upon whether I've worked with that person before and our level of comfort with each other. If we worked before, did we work as both R1 and R2 and have some sense of how the other person's style of officiating works? with our own. And that will frame for me how much time I would want to spend on the kinds of things that should be covered in virtually any pre-match.
I think, like you said, too, coming in, just meeting, if you know each other, too, if you meet each other in the parking lot, you have that time to walk in, get to know each other, kind of just, shoot the breeze for that first few minutes walking in, or just waiting on each other, even if you don't know each other, just to see, we have a nice uniform that makes us noticeable to other people, just waiting on them walking in together, knowing that time before you even get to the actual pre-match piece of it.
I'm with them. A lot of it does depend on somebody I've worked with or not. Even if I've only worked with them slightly, we may have some type of rapport as far as what is expected and such. It seems to me that it's much better to meet someone outside of the facility and walk in as a together unit. It's not always possible, but it certainly makes for a little bit of cohesion, a little bit of teamwork. Here's your whole team kind of coming into the facility together.
I agree. It shows the professionalism and that you're walking in as a team together. You meet in the parking lot, you're walking in together, because let's face it, we are in uniform and we're visible. I mean, people pick us out and we can walk in together and just talk a little bit about anything that's been going on with our day before we actually get in the gym.
And then how important is it to kind of have that discussion, especially if it's someone you haven't worked with before, to kind of have either a text or a phone conversation or something even before you get to that site to say, hey, I'm going to arrive at this time, or I'm going to park at this particular location, so that you just kind of have a sense. If it's someone you've worked with enough times, you kind of know each other's routine. But if it's not someone you've worked with before, just to kind of establish that time of when you're going to arrive, or what your normal routine might be.
I think it's always best to have contact before, maybe even if it's that day or the day before, because we know how traffic is, and we know how rush hour is, and we know how construction is. So I always like to touch base with my partners and let them know, I'll be there 4:30, 4:45. It's a 5:30 match, because by the time you get in there and you get settled and you get things measured off, you get the net measured, you get things taken care of, before you know it, you're in your captain's meeting. So allow yourself plenty of time. But I always like the reassurance to know if my partner's going to be there, if they've touched base with me, I know that maybe they're just running a little bit late and they will be there. So
the amount of time you're going to have for your pre-match discussion is going to be contingent on when your partner and you arrive. The old game, the one that we have been asked to really push, is to get a room, to change our clothes, maybe a secure room for our belongings, and to have some aspect at least of that pre-match discussion in private, because we're less likely to be interrupted. I think you can be a lot more candid in that setting. The new normal is going to move away from that direction. I don't think we'll be getting rooms. We certainly will still be asking, where is the host administrator? Where are they going to be before, during, and after the match? But beyond that, we may not be asking for rooms, because I think we'll minimize what we're bringing with us, and we'll probably have to find a place, maybe a storage under the first referee stand for our stuff, to still do that. Let's get out of Dodge, the toot and scoot, to avoid contact with the teams afterwards. So that, to me, is going to be pushing pre-communication, perhaps by email, perhaps by phone, before we end up together, especially if there's a minimal amount of time that will be available for our pre-match, again, for the benefit of the teams, that will work better together through that communication.
I think the key thing too is, since we're coming into uniform, and in most cases, sometimes, in the past, we were able to get that room to change clothes, and people were able to change clothes. Like you said, with the COVID thing, I think a big thing is maybe changing our shoes as well, not wearing our playing shoes, for a lack of a better term, that we're going to use on the court from the parking lot in. It just, messes up the shoes themselves, the gym floor, just makes everything cleaner. That's another good time when you're changing shoes to have those conversations with your partner, to kind of maybe the non-volleyball conversations, like how's your day, the getting to know you, the personalization and things like that, and then transitioning into the volleyball activities.
I think Lori brought up a really good point about traffic or other issues. A lot of us have real life jobs that are outside of this, and having good communication beforehand and telling your partner that, I have this thing happening. This is about the time I'm going to get there makes a big difference. You sometimes get that anxiety before a match. And if you know exactly that your partner is going to get there at a quarter till with a match with something that's going to start at 5:30 or something like that, and you get there a quarter till, it gives you more time to do such a thing. But if for some reason you can't do that, then at least that way you're communicating and you know what's happening. And we always run into issues. I mean, it could be even if you're not working somewhere in a big urban area, suburban or even rural areas, one little thing can mess up traffic and detour you 20, 30 miles if you have to go around because a bridge is out or somebody ran into something. So just making sure you have that communication part available is really key to, and it keeps that anxiety level down too, because if you know somebody's running late, at least that way, you feel that you're not going to be too worried about the situation, and you have enough to worry about the situations that'll be happening during the match.
Do most of you feel that you have a handle on who's going to be the first referee for the varsity match before you get there, assuming you're both Class 1 officials? Or do you kind of wait to see what the other person's preference is? How do you, I say that partly because you do not want to start off the match in conflict with your partner any more than you'd want to start the match in conflict with the coach. You just don't want those things to occur. You want a good harmonious relationship, and it surely doesn't start by fighting over who gets to be R1 for varsity. How do you all handle that?
I think I'll jump in. I think first too, thinking outside too of the area that we're in, some of these leagues might be assigning, positions R1, R2. So I think knowing your coordinator and knowing if you're if they want you to stay in those positions or not. But to answer more specifically to your question, I think that those emails back and forth ahead of time might be a good thing, because maybe you're a Class 1, but you're not comfortable going up for varsity, or you've had this team 3 or 4 times, and and you don't need to be the R1. And just having those conversations through the email ahead of time maybe eliminates some of that pressure in person that you might not want to be maybe comfortable communicating with, that you're more comfortable doing it through email or text or however you were communicating prior.
And I know one thing that I like to do too is I sometimes like to look ahead and see, am I going to have this team again? And am I going to be with this partner again? And it may be the fact that I'm going to have this team again with the same partner, or I'm going to be with this partner again the next night. So I try to make sure that, I'm having an equal opportunity with that partner to be both the R1 and the R2, so that it's fair with the partner as well as fair to the teams. So I try to make sure that I'm evening out that way, all other things being equal. Now, if I'm with a partner who doesn't feel comfortable going up, then by all means, I'm going to be the R1 for the varsity match if that's what my partner prefers. But all of the things being equal, then I'll try to kind of look ahead at my schedule and see, okay, what's the rest of the season going to look like, and how can we try to make sure that we have this evened out?
I have a thought that walks away from who gets to be the R1. And for some matches, it's who gets to be the R2 and control the bench, depending on the combination of coaches that you're dealing with. You may be saying, I'm very happy to be the R2 for this match. I have a good working relationship with a given coach. I know Jim likes to work from that structure lots of times said, you know what, from our combination of work, I actually think I get along better with that coach who could be the problem than you do. Why don't I be the R2 for that match? So for some referees, they advocate for being the R2 because they feel it actually may be better, the better combination of the two referees.
That doesn't mean I'm going out to lunch with them afterwards or dinner with them afterwards.
Only if they're buying you a beer, Jim.
It's more about that, once again, that comfort level. And sometimes when you're actually dealing with somebody who is maybe less experienced as well, R1 is a position that, you know, sometimes people are like, well, they'd rather be R2 or whatever, but R1 is the general position where you're controlling the things, and it's the same type of a situation where you're beckoning for serve and the rally's going and you make your calls. And R2 is where the odd things happen. And so sometimes I might even recommend, just like Rick said, that, hey, why don't you go ahead and go up for this match? Because I feel very comfortable over here dealing with a situation that may occur, or this way, or maybe even a situation of giving someone more experience to go up there as an R1. That sometimes can be something that's a great deal. Hey, here's your opportunity to go up for a higher level match that you may not have done in the past. So for me, that sometimes is the matter, and I'm totally comfortable with it. I check my ego at the door.
Well, the best part of it, Jim, is where you say, do you want to go up and I'll defend your bad calls, or shall I go up and you defend my bad calls?
Now that's a little personal, but that's true.
I think too that sometimes we think the R2 position's easy and that we just want to do that instead. And we all know that it's not easy if it's done correctly, and it can make or break us for that night. And we've all been there when we're up on that stand and we're out on a limb by ourselves as an R1 just because we have a weak R2. And the R2 position's, again, super important, and having that stronger official sometimes isn't a slap in the face that you're the R2 tonight. It's, you know, we have a job to do that's best for these kids, and we have to come out and do it. And if my role tonight is to be the R2, then I'm the R2. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You can control a match just as much as the R2 as you can as the R1, sometimes more. So
I agree with that. That's just what I was going to chime in with, Lucas. You know, the R2 is so important. Sometimes I think even the newer officials come in and there's an R1, R2, and they're like, oh, I'm good being an R2 and R2, but R2 can make or break it. And there's a lot of responsibility besides just blowing a net call. There's a whole lot more than that, just to facilitate the match, keep things going, and defend calls, maybe, as Rick says.
And I think sometimes you don't understand how important an R2 is until you see a really good R2 work.
Yes.
Because once you've seen an official who is a very solid R2 work a really good match, then you really see what an impact that official can have on the match and how important they can be to the successful execution of the match. You know, once you see that, and then you're like, oh wow. Because I know it wasn't until I was further along in my officiating career that I really understood that I was like, wow, that person made a huge difference. And it wasn't the person on the stand, it was the person who was the R2 who really made that match go.
And in the whole partnering vein, having a strong person on the other side of the net can give you a certain level of comfort, that you know that all you have to do is take care of your job. The same way as we say, if we have professional line judges or even really good parent line judges, same situation. It allows you just to concentrate on your job and not have to worry about somebody else's job. And the other thing is that you also want to make sure that if you have somebody that's maybe not as experienced, or maybe as experienced, but maybe not at whatever the level of this match might be, that you make sure you're on the same page. And that's a big part of it, that as far as being an effective partner, I can't be giving you a discrete signal that you don't know what it is, okay? It doesn't help anybody. So you need to know that they know what's going on, you know, what you're going to be giving them. They may not want a lot of things, Okay, they may just be, like Lori said, just take care of the bench and defend my bad calls and be done with it, and take care of the table and everything else. That might be all that they want, and they're going to take care of things. Other people might say, hey, help me out with this or that, or whatever it might be. If you see a potential alignment or whatever the case might be, or back row, help me out with those things. I know one of the early in my career, actually, I worked with Lori, and we were doing a scrimmage, and we were over there. You know, it was definitely early in my career, to the extent that I was not really strong on back row play, and there was a ball at the net, and the setter was back row, and she clearly dumps it, and Lori's over there showing me back row. I'm looking at her, I'm going, hi, good to see you too. Had no idea what she was doing as a partner. And so finally she made the call and blew the whistle. And so we talked afterwards. Fortunately, it was a scrimmage, so it was kind of nice. We talked afterwards, and she said, yeah, you really have to kind of focus in on this. I was probably 3-4 years into it, and I didn't come from a volleyball background where I knew the game. So I had to learn it as I went along, and I'm still a student of it as well. So every time I go out there, I see something new, and I'm like, oh, I ought to bring that to one of our meetings, because how they were set up in serve receive, it was something I never knew before. So and let's bring it up to somebody else, and then hopefully at one of our association meetings, people get learn from something like that. So if I can bring something to them, it makes a difference.
I think you said a key thing too, knowing the informal signals. I think there's a lot of times where, as officials in certain areas, you have that area informal signal that's not approved, and then you kind of work with somebody else from another area, and they're like, what are they doing? So I think sticking to the federation's approved informal signal is a key thing. That's our communication. That's our language. That's how we can communicate with each other. So if we're doing it properly, then that piece is easier than when we throw in these little, abnormities that are our thing,
I want to make sure that my partner, let's say I'm the R2, and I want to know if my partner is going to be comfortable. If I'm saying, I will step away from the post with information you need. It will always be rally ending information from my perspective. If I give you 4 hits, I will never whistle it, no matter how clear a 4-hit call it is. But I may move to the court to show this is the right call. Trust me on that. If you wave me off or you show a touch, I'm good, and I will drop it and be back into position. However, I want to know if you're comfortable with me whistling a down ball where I've stepped up and picked up an angle. Will you be looking for my help on that? And if not, do you want me to go ahead and whistle that? The same would be true of a clear back row block, such as by the setter who happens to be the last server at the net, or a clear back row attack. If you wave off those things and basically say, no, they were below the height of the net or behind the line, then I'm not going to whistle those. But if you don't look at me, it's pretty important we get the call right. How comfortable are you if I whistle those? If you tell me you're not comfortable, then we need another mechanism to address any clear mistakes, such as getting called across the court and making sure we get the call right, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in general, you definitely need to have that conversation about when is it going to be appropriate to call your partner across the court, and when is it appropriate to call your other officials across the court, whether it be your line judges or whoever else that you may need. And in this case, it would just be your line judges or your R2. So when is that appropriate? Of course, you don't want to be doing it often, because you want the match to flow and you want it to continue. But you do need to have that conversation of when is the appropriate time for me to do that. And I think that's something that particularly less experienced officials may have a difficult time doing. They may, in their mind, they may know I need help and I don't know what to do, but they may not feel comfortable of actually calling their partner over to solicit that information and solicit that help. So I think it's important to have that conversation in your pre-match to say, this is when I'm going to need it. But I also think as the R2, if you're the more experienced official, or if you have been in that situation before, I think it is entirely appropriate for you to kind of initiate to your partner, to kind of give that look to your partner to say, invite me over. I have information that you need. So, tell me to come to you and we will talk about this. So kind of give that glance of, I'm inviting myself over, please extend the invitation so that I can come and we can chat about this.
I agree. And I think another thing, and this may come up a little later as we're chatting here. And I think like even with a maybe not so experienced official, you got to build in your routine, because the R2 making the movements and giving the signals and all of that, it's great. And once you learn the system and you're picking them up with your eyes, that is really huge. Because I know I've worked with all of you, and I know maybe even early on, maybe my eyes, I wasn't centering with you and picking up with you. And I'm like, good Lord, that ball's up in the air. We can shoot a little glance at our partner to see if they're giving us one of those informal signals or giving us a signal so that we know that we got to hit our whistle. So I think as a newer, with the newer officials, you can build into your routine once your whistle goes, if you're centering with your partner, or anytime you get in a jam, if you can shoot a glance at your partner to see if your partner's giving you information. But it's a really hard thing to do, to get your eyes to go to your partner, because you feel like you're going away from the ball. So
I think you would agree with this too, Lori. You kind of, with that glance, you're getting confirming information kind of from your partner, like, hey, we got this right, or comforting information, and just relaxation with those basic, even if a half-second look over.
Right.
Well, I think that's all that comes into that effective partnering, is the fact that we're using the tools that we have, and our primary person to utilize is our partner. They're on the same wavelength. They know the rules. They've been tested. They go to training every year. So that's the person that's most likely going to be in your corner. They're also the one wearing the same colored shirt as you have on. So, certainly coaches will be glad to help you all the time. Usually it's in their favor. Sometimes not. Sometimes, oftentimes we'll find coaches who are more about the game than whatever the case is. I would say even the majority of the time we'll find that. But keep in mind that we're always looking at something different. And that's part of what it is. And so that if somebody is looking at something different as far as a partner, it's really up to us to make sure we utilize that. And that's where we got to do it. And that look, Lori, that you talked about taking a quick glance, especially if it's something that potentially might be an issue, that makes a huge difference. If I see my partner step out, if I'm R1, I see my partner step out to help me out with a call, there's probably something there. And eventually I'll get back to you, Rick.
I want to take a second to talk about the advantage of walking the court with your partner to determine ground rules, so you're both on the same page. And I don't think I've ever had a situation where my partner and I disagreed on how to handle a ground rule. If you did have that, I suspect the R1, you want the same ruling if you're doing back-to-back matches to be in play. I guess you're really tasked with getting on the same page as on that one. If the R1, otherwise, to me, the R1 for varsity would be the deciding person. Or the next thing you might be doing is doing your meet and greet with coaches as a team and asking the coach, we were just reflecting on this, Coach, how has that been played in this gym? And then you can essentially cement your understanding. But that's going to be a critical time then going to the coaches, because it helps you by doing that together to avoid spending more time with one coach than the other coach, which can create a situation going into a match. And two together, to me, helps modulate how much time you're spending. It should be quick. It should be friendly. You should show yourselves to be approachable. And essentially, you're there for the kids. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
I think finding out from the home team's key, though, too, is important to kind of see what they've been doing in the past, just for that consistency factor. You know, hopefully that what they've been doing is by rule, but, you know, just having that consistency of that we're not changing it match to match more in the, I guess, if you're going to argue about it. But again, if kind of just knowing the gyms in your area and having that consistency as officials that we're going to handle this gym that way. And something you could talk about kind of in association meetings too, that we have this gym and we have this odd, let's say, backboard. How are you going to handle it as officials? Just kind of getting, obviously you're going to have those out, you know, officials maybe that are coming in that aren't in those associations, which is fine, but just having that consistency of handling it the same way across the board.
In that pre-match with coaches, from the host coach, you're going to find if there's any special promotion that night. Although my sense is in this COVID world in which we find ourselves, the likelihood of having promotions this year, probably not so much. But you still need to find that out because you're going to address that at the pre-match with the coaches and captain.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so the next part, the coin toss. So we've got those ground rules, and now we've got to kind of relay those to the captains, to the coaches, and the ground rules, and then kind of the official greeting. That's going to be a little bit different this year, as we all know. Typically, we want that meeting to be short anyway. I think a lot of times we try to make that a little bit longer than it really needs to be, but it should be a very quick meeting, just, you know, anything special about the particular facility that we're in, those particular ground rules, make sure everything is legal with the teams, do the actual coin toss that needs to be done, and then, you know, get them onto the warm-up. But this year, Rick, do you want to give us a little bit of what will be different with our COVID restrictions on the coin toss, or the non-coin toss, as it will be this year?
So we'll start off by the first referee going to one side of the net, walking away from the officials table, probably the first referee on the left side of the net and the second referee on the right side of the net, each with a coach and potentially no more than one captain. They do not have to bring a captain with them. The visiting team will choose serve or receive. There will be no coin toss. During that time, everybody will maintain a social distance. They said 3 to 6 feet. To me, everybody's saying 6 feet, so I don't know why you just, but they're saying 3 to 6 feet. So you're essentially tasked with truly minimizing. You're not going to go, here are the lines around the court. You're not going to do those kinds of things. You're going to talk about overhead obstructions. You're going to talk any special lines on the court, and then you're going to get out of there as quickly as you possibly can. The benches, well, the bench will be chosen initially by the home team. Teams will not change benches during a match unless the referees perceive there to be an advantage on one side or the other, in which side the teams may choose to switch benches between sets. If they do so, a different protocol will be used. The entire team on the first referee's left the players will go to the bench, they'll pick up everything, and they'll go around the stand to the other side. The other side, including the players, will pick up everything and go on the second referee side. And the second referee will get out of the way of everybody. The bottom line there is anytime there is a bench change like that, somebody should be in charge of sanitizing those benches. So that's the construct. Very seldom will there be a situation where for the first 4 sets of a varsity match, the teams will be changing sides. So that we'll get into a deciding set later, but those are some of the things that are different. So I won't have to drop my coin and have Jim make a foot dig anymore this year, maybe.
Let's hope. Let's hope. So that leads us into the warm-up section of the match. And during warm-ups, this is a time where you've got an opportunity. Both referees really have a separate set of duties, but they also do need to come together to do part of their pre-match duties as well. So let's talk about some of the things that they need to do separately, kind of to prepare for the match, but then also some of the things they need to do together. So as the R1 and the R2, what are some of the things that you do to prepare for the match during that warm-up time?
I think mostly is working with the support crew from the position you're going to work with mostly. So if I'm the R2, my support crew I'm going to work closest with is the scores table. So I'm going to go get on the same, I'm going to communicate with them. Again, we're talking normal situation. I'm going to communicate with them, tell them kind of what I'm expecting, see their experience as a, you know, as a scorekeeper, time operator. I want to tell them what I'm looking for as the R2. Again, we have about 20 minutes to get this all done. As you said, we have to get back as well. R1, I'm going to work with my support crew, which is the line judges. Some cases we're going to have professional line judges where that's going to go pretty quick. It's just, you know, going over your basic information for what you're looking for from them. So the other guys can get kind of in, you know, more of the specifics, but, you know, you're just going to kind of go and work with your support crews kind of first, that you're going to work with your positions, and you're going to come back together and kind of go back into that pre-gaming, that where you left off kind of before, you know, you broke up. So sometimes getting, you know, in the matches where your support crew's parents, getting them gathered can be a challenge. So kind of waiting, getting that stuff done early can save you hassle at the end, and kind of saving the extra conversations with your partner, even though as important as they are, as we know, getting that support crew is a challenge. So just getting them, you know, set up, ready to go, and starting those communications.
One referee observes the court at all time if possible.
Arrange bathroom breaks.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So,
exactly. You're not doing any instruction typically while your partner's not there, because you need to keep an eye on the safety things of the court. And typically the R2, but sometimes the R1 needs to make sure that the double whistle occurs just before a court switch, and to make sure the horn is sounded. Often we don't even have a timer present and have to do it ourselves. So you adjust to that reality in terms of how much time you actually have and when your support crew actually is available.
I think something else we haven't really touched on is you know, kind of the time management of getting everything, you know, ready to go too, and managing this is, trust me, athletic administrators, school principals, they don't want to be there later than they have to, you know, so making sure that we have that captain's meeting in time to start, that ball's going up at the scheduled start time, if they have announcements and things. And, you know, everybody has their own thing. I like to do that, you know, so we, you know, 25 minutes before the scheduled start time, so that captain's meeting's over, we're getting warm-ups going, we have announcements, and we're getting going on that schedule.
Sound like a personal issue there as an athletic director.
A little bit,
but
time management's key for everything.
But I think you brought up a good point, and this is, once again, as a partner, if for some reason your partner is preoccupied with something, particularly the R1 working with support crew, line judges, or someone else, and you know they're looking for, or they haven't found the line judges, or R2 is busy working with the table during warm-ups, the R1 goes ahead and helps and gets those warnings in, just like Rick was talking about. So it really is partnering together, working with each other, making sure that everything gets done one way or another. I know a lot of people will try to, you know, one of the things we try to do is verify rosters. We're now still, they've changed the rule. They don't have to bring the roster with them. They turn them into the table for this year. That may stay the same for the rest of the time. Who knows what's going to happen. But verifying rosters, particularly, you know, with kids that wear warm-ups and we can't really tell the numbers anymore, verifying the number of kids, verifying, you know, that there's no duplicate numbers on the roster, things that we can do ahead of time. And if one person's reading it, the other person is partnering and checking people or counting or whatever the case might be. I know other sports take responsibility for one team or another. And one official would take care of one team and count their players, another one would count the other players on the other team. We kind of work together as a team no matter what, but we're still going to verify between each other. So, and I think that's one of those things that during that warm-up time that we have to make sure that we're working together to get things accomplished, because there's nothing worse than, we have a time warmed up. It's a little different than some other things that we know we have exactly this amount of time and we're going to start it at this time. But if we don't start that warm up on time, then we're always going to be behind. And that's where we have the issues.
Agree. Yep. Get it moving. The one thing I like to watch the players, like especially if I'm R1, I'll watch my setter, or the 2 or 3 setters that make it. I like to watch their hands. I like to see the consistency, how that ball's coming out. I kind of get a mental picture of what's going to happen in the match, and on both sides. And I also like to watch the hitters warming up, tendencies, lefties, righties, are they, what kind of things they're doing, and just have an idea.
Is the libero hitting at the net?
Right.
Well, is looking at the libero during warm-ups as well. If they are hitting, during a warm-up line, and they're actually attacking balls that are completely above the height of the net, that might come to something during the match where we have to go back and look at it, and we always have to make that judgment on that call. So that's certainly something that we could go, hey, I remember seeing her, and she's jumping higher. She might be only 5'4", but she's touching the middle of the antenna, and she's got hops. So we know that we don't judge a book by its cover, because we never know what that ability is of that player. But that certainly could come into it, and keeping an eye on that. And the same thing with the lefty righty situation. That can kind of give you an idea of where to look on the block when things come up at the net. So, I mean, we're always looking at hands at the net, but that may change the angle that you're looking at, because you have a left-handed person or right-handed person that has a tendency to, if you're a left-handed person hitting outside, you have a tendency to go line very easily because you're already, built that way. So, but it's just one of those kind of things. So keeping an eye on that as well.
Whoever's observing the court, and whether the referees are doing it together and talking about where the swings are coming from. You can't see numbers. You may not be you have to find other ways of identifying potentially your setters, because when they come out on the court for that very first rally, you really want to know where the setter is coming from. That means you have to know who the setter is, and you may have to find a way of identifying that person. I like to watch my middles, and then I like to look on the lineup to see if my middle leads the setter or follows the setter, because that's where I'm going to be able to expect the libero to be in the back row to judge where they should be from a position standpoint. I'm also going to look at moving hands versus static hands. Hands may look very, very different when the setter is standing still, but as soon as the setter has to run for the ball, what happens with the hands, and what's my comfort level in wanting to set consistent hands and fair hands for both teams for the match. And meanwhile, we're also charged with looking for illegal equipment, headphones, the variety of things that could compromise the safety, and address that through a coach, not directly with a player. All those are things we're charged with while we're supposed to be doing so many other things at the same time, and potentially waiting for our support crew to show up.
So once we actually get through the warm-ups, through the pre-match and everything, now we're actually starting the match. Oh, the easier part of our job actually begins, where we can relax and kind of settle into what we're actually doing. What are some of the things that we try to do now that we've built the anticipation, we've done all of our homework to make this match go well as partners? What do we do during the match to make sure that we continue to partner effectively, that will make the match go smoothly?
For me, it's eye contact before and after every rally. Absolutely, before, just making sure, as Lucas said, any type of play ending information, any type of of situations where I might not be able to know what's going on, and making sure that my partner is ready to go. Um, you know, we see situations all the time where an R1 will go ahead and beckon for serve when the R2 has their back to the table because there's some type of a scoring issue. And that's a situation where we weren't partnering effectively. We're not making sure that that person was there and ready to go. So if we're not doing that, that can always be a big issue as far as as what we're dealing with.
Yeah, the two pieces of that, the R1's commitment to the R2, I won't go without you. And the R2's commitment is, I'll always come back with a proper ready signal for you. And it will be with my whistle in my mouth, because if my whistle's not in my mouth, I'm not really ready. As the R2, I'm telling you, I will be visible with help. If I step away from the post, I have information for you. So Jim, I'll add to that. We're going to center before every rally and at the end of every rally, and as appropriate during a rally, which I know you do.
I think making each other comfortable too. Like as an R2, it's my job to make my R1 comfortable, and it's the same thing as an R1. I want to make my R2 as comfortable as possible. And how many times as an R1 are we up there and our R2's leading us into signals, and it's not the fault. I was going to signal at all, and you're like, now we're not on the same page. You know, we're not leading each other. You're taking the R1 out of their comfort zone. I think just make the comfortability of everything is important when it comes to partnering. I think the eye contact helps with that, and just is doing what we're supposed to. You know, as an R2, my job is to mimic the R1. We talked earlier, there is cases where I might have to lead you, and that's fine. But I think just, you know, making each other comfortable, not leading, and then just being on the same page. You know, when we're giving different signals, you know, I'm showing a lift and you're showing a double, you know, it makes us look like we're not on the same page.
I think that whole thing starts with, what do you want from me? The R2 to the R1. What help can I provide you with? My job is to serve and protect you as the R1. That means I will make sure that if the coaches are not behaving appropriately, give me the first chance, if possible, to deal with that, and let me stop the coach from addressing you across the court and get them to work through me. Here's how I would ask for a card. Here's how I'll show you if I think you're looking at me with that strange look. It might be you want to know where that setter's coming from. Is she may be positioned so she could be back row or front row. Tell me where you have her. Okay, you've got her coming out of the back. Thank you. How do you want me to deal with a tape shot on my side? My inclination is to show you a head nod to say play on a pancake save, a floor save, a ball that's hit into the tape and stays on the attacking team side. If I see a touch, my head nod says, I see no fault. If you then come up with 4 hits, I'm going to go, yep, it was 4 hits, and show 4 hits with you. But essentially, we need to know what to expect from each other. You're going to say to me, look, I want you to lead me. If I give you that look, you lead me. I've lost what happens. I've lost what happened on that play. It may be even who won the rally. And then, oh yeah, okay, I've got the fault, or if necessary, the fault, and I'll follow suit. It's a rare situation, but that deer in the headlights look really tells the R2, step up and help yourself as a team. And you get credibility from the coaches. You get credibility from the players when they see you working together to get plays right.
And I think sometimes as the R1, you sometimes get in your own head about a match or about a call or about something, and you could be doing everything correct. You could have called the match correctly, you could have called the call correctly, but you start second guessing yourself and you start thinking, did I just see what I think I saw? Did I call that correctly? Wait, did I call that what I was supposed to call? And so you get this look on your face and you don't even realize you're doing it. You get this puzzled look or this worried look on your face, and that's an opportunity for your partner to kind of give you that look back to say, no, you're fine. Kind of give you some reassurance to say, you're good, everything's great. Just a little, maybe a thumbs up, maybe something to just be like, hey, you're fine, everything's good, let's keep going. So kind of be attuned to that and know when your partner might need a little extra encouragement. to continue on.
And sometimes just a slight smile to your partner. Like you said, that head nod makes a big difference. I can remember one of my first tournament matches I got to do, I was working with Rick, and I was R1, and there was a couple of calls that I was not sure that I should have made the call or whatever it was. And he gave me the little chest thumbs up. We're good. Kind of keep on going. And that gave me a lot of encouragement to continue to do such a thing.
Yeah, and I've seen some interesting things lately from partners which clearly weren't pre-matched. One was the R2 whistling the R1's antenna. That's a no-no. If the line judges don't have it and the first referee doesn't have it, and as the R2, you're certain that the ball hit the R1's antenna from all the way across the court, you may want to show an out call, but you don't want to whistle that. By the same token, although everybody expects the ball that hits into the tape and stays on the attacking team side and lands out to be not whistled by the R2, but showing out off of you or out off of you, because whether it was off the block or not, or off the attack, it's out off somebody. But what happens if you haven't discussed one of those where the ball hits the tape with a block up in front of the R1, and the R1's not sure? As soon as they give you that, what do you have? You can lead your partner on that if you've pre-matched it. If you haven't pre-matched it, you're liable to do something, and your partner is going to do something counter to that. So some of those unusual situations probably are well taken for that pre-match discussion. Handling an injury, there's blood. I've got, come down off the stand, R1, stand at a respectful distance and show concern. I've got the blood cleanup, or I've got the help, or if we might have an exceptional sub situation, I will get to the table and figure out things so that we're best prepared once a player is removed safely. To the extent to which you don't pre-match those things, you may not do as well as you might have otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that is the key to almost all of this, and especially in partnering, is that pre-match and getting to know your partner and understanding what you're going to do for each other, and really talking it through and knowing where your partner's going to be and what they're going to do for you as you go through. Let's talk a little bit about deciding sets. Those will be a little bit different this year as well. Normally, we would have a coin toss again. This time, it will be a little different. So let's talk about how the deciding set mechanic will happen this year.
So it'll be at center court with the R1 and my guess is it's not specified, but probably the home team captain on one side. I guess it's probably okay if you're all on the same side of the net. Doesn't really matter. The choices will include side if side makes a difference. That again should have been determined at the beginning of the match. If it doesn't, you're going to maintain the same sides. That would put a coin toss as serve or receive. I'm not sure we have total clarification as to whether, if it's not discussed that they're going to switch sides, that you have the choice of side for that. If the teams are staying on the same side for the entire match. So I think we probably need to get that clarified. Some of that stuff is in flux right now. You're going to minimize that. The second referee, and nobody's shaking hands, by the way. You're not shaking hands. They're not shaking hands ever. You're going to bring them onto the court, and they're going to move into their positions. No coming to the net for a handshake before or after. So at the end of the match, you're dismissing them. So they're not going to shake hands after that coin toss. Home team calls it. You get the result. You're going to go back to your position, and you're going to stand on the side. First of all, you're going to make sure that the clock hasn't started, because until the first referee whistles whether what the teams are doing in terms of benches or not, there is no starting of that 3-minute clock. So you're going to go back and you're going to stand where you're visible, and you're going to show with an open hand which which side will serve. Now, typically they're going to be on that side. But if there is a court change, you're going to show the court change. or you're going to show the team stay. And the first referee will then whistle and show either stay or change sides if they are changing sides. At that point, you're going to step back and have the timer sound, essentially start the 3 minutes. But that's after the first referee whistles and shows stay or go. If the teams are going to change, and it should be rare, the team on the first referee's left is going to pick up their belongings, and the second referee is going to guide that they go around the stand. They're not going to cross in front of the table. Does anybody understand that to be different than that?
No.
All right, so it makes the same common sense as if they were changing benches after each set because there's an advantage. My sense is that we're not going to run into that often. Teams will typically stay on the same side.
Yep.
When the second referee steps back to the table, anytime that they're approaching the table to do anything, they are advised to use hand sanitizer going in and hand sanitizer coming back out, which raises the question that everybody has been asking about, which is, how concerned are we in rolling the ball out to start a set? And the answer is, if you're concerned, you probably can wear gloves, but then you need to properly dispose of the gloves. And then you should use hand sanitizer. Whenever you're uncomfortable, hand sanitizer is the right issue to
I think
follow.
that's something you could carry your own, hand sanitizer with you if it makes you uncomfortable. And once you throw the ball out, just walk back to the table, real quickly, put the hand sanitizer on, get the ready signal, and we're off.
Yeah, that should be a major concern, pretty much only to those people who still are touching their faces. If you're not touching your faces, that's not as that much of an issue, but it's still a good thing to do.
And in the few minutes we have left here, let's talk about so in the post-match here, so we've finished the match and the things that we have left to do here. Of course, we want to thank our support crew. We want to make sure that we go through and thank everybody that has helped us out. So our line judges, our table and everything. And I think that's really important. I think that's something that we sometimes miss. So especially the R2 who's on that side with the table, make sure that you go down through and thank everyone who's helped out during the match. And then sometimes difficult to thank the line judges, but before they get away, maybe the R1 as you're getting off the stand, thank them. And sometimes the R2 can grab them as they're bringing the flags or the balls back to the table as well. And then the last part is the debrief. And Lori, if you could tell us a little bit about what you like to talk with during a debrief, some of the things that you like to go over with in a debrief.
Any unusual plays that may have happened, maybe discuss those, and if anything, if I had a call that was questionable or anything that maybe I missed in the match and my partner had one view and I had a different view, anything we could have done differently. What could we have done differently? What could we have done better? And you got to have just that honest conversation, because then that gives your partner what they need to work on next, or how could they have done better with a situation if a situation arised, and it just any atypical situations.
And it could be even just handling regular situations. We talked a lot about working with people we know and people we don't know. If we're working with someone that we're not familiar with, that's from a different area or even from the same area that we've just never worked with, and they have a different way of doing it, it might be something that we incorporate into our game in the future, or it might be a learning time for somebody else if you're the more experienced person and you have a very good situation. Being open to something else when we talk to officials who haven't been doing the same thing for years and years and years, frequently it gives us a great opportunity to learn something because they look at the game from a different perspective. And talking about that in debrief, you can learn a lot of things. If we have professional officials as line judges, I learned a lot in debriefs as a line judge in working with more experienced officials than me, or even same experience or less experience, just seeing what they did. What did you see on that play? I'm not saying it was wrong or right. It was just what did you have on it to make that call? Because may have had it differently, or I may have had it the same, or whatever the case is. But just knowing what did you see can sometimes bring something to light, and also maybe learning where to look for something. When I first started, I didn't know where to look as much as I do now, and I still sometimes find myself looking at the wrong thing. I made a call 2 years ago where the libero was close to the attack line, jumped up to set the ball, and I'm still watching her feet as she goes up and doubles the daylights out of the ball so bad that I was the only one in the facility that didn't see the double. But by gosh, I knew exactly where her feet were when she jumped in the air. She was behind the line, so I knew she was safe. But it's one of those kind of things that knowing where someone saw something makes a big difference, or what they just happen to see. So that's why that debrief makes a big difference.
Let's talk about the COVID world. In the COVID world, we may be getting out of Dodge and we don't have a room, or we don't have a debrief at the time, but we should have a debrief, at least by email, that covers all the things that Lori was talking about. And that may be a little more of an effort to do that, but it's certainly important for our own individual improvement and the improvement of us as a partnering team. One additional piece is, I'm not sure what we're doing with flags this year. If the schools are not providing them someone in the referee team typically does, in which case there needs to be a plan for how to sanitize them. And the other thing is getting them back from the line judges can kind of delay your toot and scoot at the end. Just a thought on that.
I think the part of the debrief too is that we're a team, so we're analyzing the match ourselves as a team. It shouldn't be R1 driven, R2 driven. It should be, what could we have done better as a team? What could we have done individually to do better as a team, to do better for the kids too? And then I think the most important thing is figuring out after we have this debrief of where we're going out to dinner and having a good time.
I think that's a great way for us to end this discussion. I wish we could all get together and go out somewhere tonight, but unfortunately, that is not the way this one is going to end. So,
Shane, I'm buying you a virtual beer.
I appreciate it. Rick, Jim, Lori, Lucas, thanks for joining me on this, and we appreciate your time this evening. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great season.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As you can see, effective partnering is important to the successful facilitation of a match. Our goal is to give the student athletes the best possible match experience. By partnering effectively and doing our jobs to the best of our abilities, we can do our part to make that goal a reality.